Essa. How are you, Mr. Dave?
Okay. It's Corona. It sucks.
But
you want to know what? I'm talking football. I haven't
'Cause
had to
we
rob
like it.
anybody yet.
Not yet.
Mean, I'm not coughing or hacking.
Hey, y'all out there, we love you, our listeners. You can help us spread the word, make us become bigger than we are. We don't need to be rich and famous, but enough so we don't have to go rob people.
Yeah, I'm not asking for much.
You know?
I don't need to make a ton of money.
It's Gridiron 360. We are going to wrap up our discussion of the Big Ten Conference in terms of 2020 NFL draft prospects. We started this conference off really going through the top 12 guys, regardless of position. We just ripped through in a couple of casts other names of note by position group on the offensive side of the ball. Now we're going to go on the defensive side of the ball, rip through other names of note out of the Big Ten that will be eligible and that you should know about. Sound good?
Let's do it.
All right, we'll go to edge rusher first. A redshirt senior from Michigan played for the Michigan State Spartans at defensive end edge rusher, Mr. Kenny Willick. I'm going to figure it out. Willikis.
Yeah, they don't give you.
I had that the first time when we said it off air. 6'3", 264, 31.25-inch arms, 9.5-inch hands, ran a 4.87 at the combine, threw up a strong 32 reps on the bench, 32.5-inch vertical, 119-inch broad, 7.39 on the cone. We've talked about how this draft isn't super deep, especially with like uber talent or guys that excite you at the edge position. There's Chase Young, and then there's a drop-off. And then there's another section of guys with your A.J. Epinezas, maybe your Tier Gross Matos, maybe your Kalavon Chason. Again, some guys that, depending on the defense, 4-3-3-4, are they tweeners? Are they tweener from the D-end outside linebacker position, or are they a tweener for D-end to D-tackle position, especially if it's like a 3-4, right?
Yep.
All right. So, but there's not a lot. These we're gonna drop three names, and then I'll rattle off. We'll talk about the guys on the defense that you need to know about for a few minutes, and then I'll go into everybody else that's eligible at that position in this conference this year, just to make sure we cover just about everyone. So the first guy here, Mr. Willikis. He's actually not too deep on draft boards at this position, again, because it's not super deep. But, you know, a guy that redshirt senior has started pretty much the past 3 years and has been very consistent. You know, there's nothing exciting that's come out of Michigan State lately. Let's see, started in 2017. So what was the year they went to the playoff? Was that 16 maybe? He might have been the year before. And they haven't really done anything since. They've gone backwards. You mentioned in the other cast the off-field issues potentially reigning with their coach. But nonetheless, this guy racked up this past year 78 total tackles, 32 solos, 10.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, along with 4 fumble recoveries. Doesn't seem to have had any picks. Don't necessarily need that. Don't have any passes defensed. I do like to see that from DNs. It's an added bonus, especially when you're talking about, you know, like I said, there's that next tier after Chase Young, and then I think this is like the tier after the Chase on Matos, Epina. There's like another tier after that. This guy might fall there. All these three guys may.
Yep. Yeah, this guy's kind of got an interesting background to him. Brought in was, I think it said like all Michigan. Yeah, all Michigan pick is both a linebacker and a running back coming into school. Now, of all the things I'll say about Michigan State, and Michigan State generally has kind of left a little bit to be desired. Yeah, that's part of it. This guy was a walk-on. Didn't play a whole lot his freshman year. But if you looked at his sophomore and junior year, and his junior year, he was fantastic. He led the team with 14.5 total tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 73 total tackles. in 2017. In 2018, he was their defensive lineman of the year, and he was a top 10 nationally, but he busted his leg in the bowl game, and that kept him from going pro. What I like about this guy is, they're saying he doesn't have the athleticism maybe long-term to be a good solution in the NFL. But again, we go back to what we know, and I look at him, and I kind of think about a guy like Alex Brown, played for the Bears.
Oh.
Never flashy, good against the run.
I get
always
bored
there
sometimes with Dave's Bears references, but I like that.
Okay, like you don't use Clemson references and Giants references?
Oh, all the time. We should, but I mean, come on.
But the point is, it was never flashy. But
homers are allowed.
But as a second D end and a kid that's obviously put on some size, I never doubt guys that have been doubted over and over again and still produce.
Yep.
This is a guy that you could. It's funny because you see the All-Michigan linebacker and running back and had to walk on. Yeah. And I mean,
sub 540 as D end is all right.
I like it, and I will say this:
strong, man. 32 reps.
Yeah,
man.
and Michigan State has had, of all the things they haven't had, they've had some pretty good defenses, and usually their defenses are what carry them year in, year out. This is a guy you hear those stories about kind of coming from nothing, and this is a kid that I think maybe could turn some eyes a little bit and do something in the pros, because things kind of say that he can't, and yet he's shown he can.
That's
and
right.
to come back off a broken leg, and again, he didn't have a poor year last year at all. But the idea is, like, this was a guy that there was talk about him going pro as a junior, and now they're saying that he might not have the athleticism. I don't know. Something in it says this is a kid with a little bit of an attitude to succeed, and I kind of like that. I like that mentality. And again, you're not talking about a premier pass rusher, but most teams aren't dealing with two stacked D ends. You want a guy that's solid, that can create some disruption, can get home when the other guy's getting double teamed, and maybe he kind of fits that mold where he's just not spectacular, but all of a sudden you kind of just say, man, that guy lasted a while. He could be kind of that guy, and I love the walk-on thing.
Yep.
I love the walk-on thing.
Sure.
I love it.
All right, let's move on to the next guy at the edge position from the Big Ten. From Eden Prairie, Minnesota, a senior for the Minnesota Golden Gophers, Mr. Carter Coughlin. 6'3", 236, 31 3/8-inch arms, 9.5-inch hands. Ran for a DN, 4.57 40. Pretty good. 36-inch vertical, 126-inch broad. I don't have a bench on him. Looking at his statisticals, has at least been starting for 2, maybe 3 years, but has played all 4 years there. This past year, he racked up 49 tackles, 29 solo tackles, 4.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 recovery, 4 passes defensed. There's that category, that little extra crumb you get, especially if you're a guy maybe further down or middling, that might give you a little extra look. This guy knows to get his arms up. And if you look, he hadn't had any in his career. This was his past year. So it's a skill that obviously he learned and got better at, and maybe not perfected, because maybe he can still add on to that going to the NFL. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, 2 things they describe him at the combine, and I saw this on 2 other sites. I don't know if they're ripping it off from each other because we're ripping it off from them. But I like to see is he is a high football IQ, which goes back to what you're just talking about, but also a high motor. I think his biggest problem is going to be where he fits, and because he's a tweener, and that size range right there is pretty small coming off the edge. I remember watching a few. Obviously, I paid some attention to Minnesota this year and got you into it, and I remember seeing him play a lot behind on the other side of the line of scrimmage. Thus, his tackles for loss and sacks, forced fumbles, things like that. Disruptive. Okay, so not only if he doesn't he's got some speed, but if he doesn't get there, knows that it's starting to learn to throw his hands up. But disruptive, likes to move the tackle and play on the other side of the line one way or another, and I love that. Well, and you look at a guy that's got 6 forced fumbles in 2 years. And I look at a guy and I kind of think of players that just have a knack for figuring out how to get to the ball one way or the other. And this guy is obviously, you can't deny the fact, not necessarily he's not explosive in any particular number in the sense, well, I would almost say the force fumbles is kind of an explosive number, but the sacks aren't high numbers, but there's that go and get it mentality, by any means necessary mentality. And I think that is, something that could translate, certainly at that size and that speed. He could be, like that special team guy that, there's every team has probably one or two special teams guys that's what they are. And maybe that's who he is, but then develops more in that pass rushing ability. So I would say, that's a possibility for him and with his athleticism. And I certainly love what I saw in Minnesota this year. So that was pretty impressive too.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the next guy. This young man hails from Lagos, Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, played for the Illinois Fighting Illini, Mr. Alawole Batiku Jr. Batiku. Know this name. 6'3", 250. He was a junior. Again, another guy on, I think, a team that, doesn't have stars across the board, but a name, and they certainly don't show up in a lot of highlights, but you see the game against Wisconsin. I thought he had a pretty good game. He is a guy that I think is raw, a project, if you will. I think, if you look at his stats, he had 36 total tackles this past year, 19 solos, 9 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, no passes defensed, but really didn't have much experience prior to that. I think he was out in 2018, 2017. He saw the field barely. So a guy whose name was called for the Illini, if you did see some highlights, and again, 9 sacks. I mean, really, he's raw, young, not a lot of time playing, so there's a lot to work with. Now, that could also be, if you don't have the time, if you don't have the right coaching, it may not something he's definitely will go to a team that's willing to devote that to him.
All right, yeah, something about this kid is, he was a USC kid in 2017.
Okay, so this is where I have the lapse for 2018 in his statistics.
Yeah, so, he had to sit out a year and then headed to Illinois. Again, not a team that had a great year overall. Certainly had their big win against Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That was the big one.
And his name came up in that game, as I had said a second ago.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of highlights at Illinois, but if you heard a name called, this was one of the guys that, along with the running back Corbin, names recognition.
Now, you talked about him coming out early, so I think the challenge is going to be for him.
I said raw. He's a project.
Yeah, is whether that was the right move or not for him. I'm sure there's probably some frustration in the USC not working out for him, and then, getting to Illinois. And, you have to be concerned about how much more am I going to be able to show at this university. But, again, like you said, he's a project. He's a prospect. A kid that does have some talent in him. And at size. 9
sacks this past year. That's not bad.
No. And,
considering he only had, 36 total tackles, 19 solo, and then he has 9 sacks on there. So,
yeah. He's gonna play on the weak side, I'm sure, just because of his size. At 6'3", I don't know how much he can really max out on the size side. So, that'll just kind of be the interesting part with him.
He's 250 already, so I don't know either. I
Yeah.
don't know. All right. There's one more guy, Mike Dana at 6'2", 253 out of Michigan. He's the only other edge rusher in the Big Ten that's eligible. So let's scoot over.
Okay.
Shooter McGavin, to the D. Scoot into the D line. D tackles. We will start with a gentleman from Blue Springs, Missouri, redshirt senior for the Nebraska Cornhuskers defensive tackle Khalil Davis. Mr. Davis is 6'1", 308, 31.5-inch arms, 9.3/4-inch hands, ran a 4.75 40, 32 reps on the bench.
Not a real big prospect as far
No.
as height at this position, but
you
man,
starting
put
to-
some strength on
You
there.
see, his name is starting to pop up in that, again, maybe like a late second grouping sector, third grouping sector of D tackles. There is a lot of D tackles out there. Let's see, is this past year, and he too progressed every year. This past year had 44 total tackles, 28 solos, 8 sacks, 1 pass defense.
Yeah, I mean, well, I got to say, I'm impressed by the 8 sacks. This was a team that
For a D tackle.
Yes, yeah. I mean, this is a team you got to remember. You know, Nebraska thought, and we did I think we did a podcast completely on this about the coaches that had come to various teams starting in the 2018 season. Was not a good year. Was not a good.
Not friendly.
Yeah, not a
I
good
think
year
there
for
was
coaches.
Like Quattro in the win column.
Yeah, like we had, Willie Taggart went to Florida State. That experiment failed, but one of the big names was Scott Frost going from UCF, moving back to his alma mater at Nebraska. Saw some good things in the first year. Last year definitely did not live up to kind of that jump hype that they had. But defensively, they had some decent players there. I still think they struggled offensively. What was the name of not Fernandez. What was the name of their Martinez, right?
Yeah.
Their quarterback. Just really didn't see much out of him for his last year that they wanted. They had some struggled games, but there is some players here that they've got.
The 8 sacks is interesting for an interior defensive lineman. They're not huge in sacks. We just said, talked about some, edge guys that had, more than or right around there, and that they're usually the guys that are getting more sacks. However, do keep in mind, Nebraska's now in the Big 12. We know that the Big 12 is, sling the ball around the yard. So there's a lot more. Also, understand there's a lot more opportunity at sacks in that conference than there is elsewhere. Oh, no, they're not. Why am I saying Big 12?
They're in the Big 10.
They're in the Big 10. Sorry. They weren't they?
They were. Yeah, they were. Now, here's the thing, though. I would say is this is the kind of guy that's going to have to rely on getting low and quick penetration. Because of his size, I think that's going to be a concern. It's going to be a concern for whoever picks him up. But he was productive, and that's what you want to see. He would probably be to see a guy get a regular starts at this size. He would have to do a serious jump. It's not unheard of, but it would be unlikely. Maybe more of a rotational guy, maybe a pass rush guy you bring in a pass rush situation to help you kind of where you can load up a little bit with speed. Because he's going to get challenged by being taken on by bigger guys,
right.
Especially guys that can anchor well, which most guards in the NFL can. So that's going to be his biggest challenge. I mean, there's just no way around it.
Yeah. Well, and it's curious because I see him higher than this next guy on the board a lot of places, especially not just at the position, but in conference. And I don't know. I think this guy might be, if I had my choice, I might go with this guy, and that is a redshirt senior from Pickerington, Ohio. Where was that Roll Red Roll on Netflix? What town was that? You remember? It wasn't Pickerington, was it? I feel like that town was mentioned.
No,
anyways, for a discussion for another, very disturbing that show, but about this high school football team out of Ohio. Anyways, played for the Buckeyes at D tackle Devon Hamilton. 6'4", 320, 33-inch arms, 9.3/4-inch hands. Just a hoss. Now slower, but he's a D tackle. 5'1", 40, 33.
Steubenville was where it was.
Steubenville. He had 33 reps on the bench. Had a 7.72 on his 3-coner. Let's see. This past year, I think was his only starting year, if I can recall, but did definitely see playing time all 4 years of his career at Ohio State and contributed. This past year, he had 28 total tackles, 18 solo, 6 sacks, 1 fumble recovery. Mr. Devon Hamilton for the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yep. Yeah, this guy, you probably look at him, he's around that size to be a little bit more of a space eater, and maybe like a one gap guy, but could be a two gap guy if you put him in the middle. I think he'd have to gain a little bit more weight to do that, and I don't know functionally how that would suit him. Probably, again, where we're talking at right now, we're talking about likely rotational guys.
I mean,
certainly the
say,
pedigree out of Ohio State is a nice thing to have.
Yeah, and I would say 10 years ago, this guy might even be higher. But we talked about you talked about edge rushers, how that's changing, and then you talk about the D tackle. You talked about Aaron Donald, how it's not just
the builds are different,
right? So I mean, I think this guy's more of that generation back of D tackles that you're used to, a space eater. Not really like anything incredible athletically that's going to wow you in terms of control. And you don't have to be big to make that happen. I mean, look, one of the best D tackles plays right here in Atlanta. Probably one of the only and good things they have is Grady Jarrett. Kid's like 6 foot. I mean, he uses his leverage, but it's dynamic, and that's what you see a lot more of with these D tackles. They bring the ones there is an elite level to this interior D line position in today's NFL, and the ones that are elite stand out because they bring something special to the game.
And that's probably the challenge for him is I don't know if that his pass rushing side to the game to be that elite disruptor. I don't know that he's exceptional in that area to help there. So again, the question is, can he do it? But listen, you got to go deep on the D line. You got to be too deep, pretty much at all your positions across the front four. So I think it's a guy that can get in there and can get on a team. The question is, how long is his staying power, and can he show that? Can he develop that next level play to warrant the potential of a starting job, but more particularly staying in the league beyond the couple of years that's the average in the NFL.
All right. Let's see. One more D tackle that we want to talk a couple minutes about, and then I'll rattle off a dozen of names of other eligible D tackles in the draft. I mean, again, just like we talk about with the offensive linemen, these are big boys. They grow out back in the fields, and it's the same with the defensive linemen. So this gentleman is a redshirt senior from Blue Springs, Missouri, played for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Mr. Carlos Davis at 6'2", 313, 32-inch arms, 9 5/8 hands, 4'8", 240 in the combine, 27 reps on the bench, ran a 4.5, 220-yard shuttle. He's got, I think, a lot of the measurables to, he's. I watched a little tape on this kid, and he's strong. He's strong. He can sit down and, at his 6'2" size, obviously smaller than some of the others, but again, use that leverage, good arm work, has a nice, first explosive hit when he, throws his punch on the offensive lineman. Again, I think that's, his strength and his use of his hands and his leverage for his size are what could make something interesting. And we talked a lot about it. Sometimes you have a little bit of both, like a Grady Jarrett and then maybe a Haas in the interior and the D-line, just to have, the space eater and then a smaller D tackle that is a little more physical and athletic.
Yeah, just to mention, we just mentioned Khalil Davis. This is his twin brother.
Oh,
so,
I didn't realize that.
So they're there. He's got the size. The thing that concerns me in just the write-ups that I've seen with him is that, he is not ever known as a solid run defender, and that kind of scares me a little bit.
Yeah.
Because
maybe he's more of, like I said, he's smaller, just trying to shoot gaps and play behind the line of scrimmage.
Well, the
And if you do
NFL
that, you
Combine
might
says he offers no value as a rusher.
Wow.
That's a pretty. They don't usually make that.
His
definitive.
stats
Kind of tell you he makes plays.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
the kid looks like he's played just about as a starter almost every year since maybe his freshman year. 32 tackles last year, 17 solo, 4 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, 3 passes defensed. You know, the year before, 5 passes defensed.
he's got the other part that's probably going to be tough for him. You know, when you think about it, and this probably impacts his rushing, is his arms are actually kind of short for a guy in the interior. And that usually, you know, again, it's about getting leverage and getting your hands in the right place. And if you're getting outreached
he
by
appears
him,
to be able to use his hands all right. Like I said, his punch isn't too bad, and he uses his hands. You know, they're definitely not stable. You know, they're not static. He's trying to move them around, get offensive linemen on him. But you're right, the arms length isn't long.
yeah, so that just makes it tough, especially if you're going to, and that explains some of the run defend issues, because just using your leverage the right way is hard.
Yep.
And you're not, you know, you're dealing with the cream of the crop in the NFL, so that's going to be your challenge.
All right, let me run through the other names at D tackle in the Big Ten eligible this year, and then we'll slice this up and we'll cover the rest of the D with the linebackers, which will be both inside, outside, safeties, and corners. So other guys in the Big Ten at D tackle coming out this year: Robert Windsor, 6'4", 290 out of Penn State. Raekwon Williams, 6'4", 308 out of Michigan State. Jay-Sean Cornell, 6'3", 280 out of Ohio State. Darian Daniels, 6'3", 311 out of Nebraska. Joe Gaziano, 6'4", 275, Northwestern. Robert Landers at 6'1", 285, Ohio State. You heard his name called a bit.
Yep.
Landers is a guy you might keep your eye on. Mike, what's this guy? Panaziuk, 6'4", 300, Michigan State. Brady Reef, 6'3", 277. From what school, Dave?
I got to believe he went where his brother went, right? Iowa?
He did. His brother, though, 8 years older.
Wee bit bigger.
Yep. Drafted by the Lions, now with the Vikings, offensive tackle Riley Reef. This is his brother. Last guy is 6'3", 295, also from Iowa, Mr. Cedric Lattimore.
Yeah, you're seeing some undersized guys there, so that's probably some of their challenges.
Alrighty. We'll slap it abby and get back happy. See you next time
On the gridiron.
Whoop.